Okay. So we had started to try to figure out what exactly this mitzvah is of Yisachar Zvulun, where Zvulun provides for Yisachar's needs from his business when Yisachar himself doesn't have time to learn. He says it's not, Rav Moshe had said, Lo haya klal inyan tzedakah, v'lo haya yachol Zvulun litein lo klum misachat tzedakah shayitzarach litein, ela shahaya zeh inyan shutfis mamish. He says the answer is that this is a real business arrangement. This is a business partnership, and it's got nothing to do with the mitzvah of tzedakah, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, which is a fascinating, daring statement. In other words, I'm giving up a huge amount of my income in my business to my business partner, whose sole contribution to the business is that he sits and learns in the Beis Medrash. He's not an active partner, but he's giving me a non-tangible benefit. And essentially, I don't even know if that would be recognized legally, but it's some kind of business partnership. Which, when you think about it, we make partnerships with non-active partners all the time. Our wives are our partners in our business. Many times our children are partners in our business because we provide them with the income that we generate from our businesses, even though they don't contribute to the business.
Yeah, Robbie.
Hello.
Well, I was just making sure because I logged in and referring my phone name. I just changed my name so you know who it is here.
Yeah, hi, we're on.
All right. No, I just want to make sure because when I joined, my name was Galaxy S20. I thought maybe you're wondering who is this guy, and I have to change my name back to my normal name. Okay, hey, Vita.
Okay, very good. I didn't realize that with this dongle you have the noise is really strong coming out. Okay, good to have you back, Mordechai. Okay, yeah. So just getting back to, so we're learning this tshuva from Rav Moshe about the Yisachar Zvulun partnership. So it seems like from Rav Moshe that it's not in the realm of the mitzvah of tzedakah, but it's a business arrangement that I feel that this person is actually helping in my business in the sense that his spiritual endeavor is what I want to invest in as part of what I do to generate income. Shezavulun nasam li Yisachar kol schar hapoalim bahasados v'chol ma shahayitzarach Yisachar lahashlim b'malachos degavri. That Zavulun covers the cost of everything that Yisachar would normally have to invest into the business. V'gam keven shahagavri lo holchu mibatem mibeis hamedrash harei lo yachlu gam hanashim leilech l'sados. And he says that since the men could not leave their Beis Medrash, their wives also could not go out and work. The Harei tzrichos l'shamish baleinu v'neihem af kashem gedolim b'malachos da'afiyu b'shul ch'doime. That Yisachar's, the women in the Yisachar tribe, because their husbands were learning Torah full time, they also could not work as well. At least not to the level of industriousness that they were capable of, because they had to take care of the household and the family. Gam lahavi mashet tzarich liknos, and to go shopping. B'chol zeh hayachoshev Zavulun kol ma shahotzi al chelak Yisachar u'ma shenitzmach v'kein ma sheherviach achar nikoy haotzos eitzel Zvulun b'mischar baniyos v'yicholkin bein shneihem kepashtus halashon. And basically, Zavulun takes this all into account when he sets up the business partnership. And he basically says that after the cost of doing business has been deducted, I take all of the profits and I split them evenly between myself and Yisachar. That's what we saw last time. And that was a contract that existed between the two of them. So it turns out that Zavulun did not give to Yisachar a complete half of all profits. The Zavulun notel gam mechza mikol ma sheherviach Yisachar misodosav umichol shalo shayanimsa sham zuchuchis levana, because Zevulun was also entitled to take 50% of Yisachar's profits from his own natural resources. As Rav Moshe had demonstrated before, the Chelek of Yisachar also had natural resources, and Zevulun was entitled to half of that. In other words, basically, the workers were hired to harvest the natural resources, the agricultural resources that were on Yisachar's property. And that was split 50-50. And Zevulun's business that he did with ships and with imports and trades and things like that, that was also split 50-50. Shemin hasados v'haginos v'habehemos shel Yisachar haya lizvulun eze chelek kares v'kablan v'gam mehazuches levana shayinimtzu b'chol gam kinei yitzrach chavoda harbe lahasigam. He says, because you needed a lot of work to be invested in harvesting the agriculture from Yisachar's land. Shelo hayu munachim l'mayla al gabe hachol deleker davar zeh, el etzarech al zeh amal v'yagia lahasigam me'achol ad shi'aroi l'mochem u'machma zeh gam ken b'zbuchis haya eze chelek shaya shayach lizbulun v'gam ha'shalochem sirsurim ba'ad tirchas ha'mechira. There were also expenses that went into extracting the fine crystal that was extracted from the sand that was on Yisachar's property. And so when they split evenly, not only the business profits from Zevulun's business, but also the agricultural resources from Yisachar's property. וגם מהעמל והיגיע שהיוסק זבולון גם לבד בשתי הנחלות בנסיוסו ובעניוס, למוכרם היה כל פנים גם זבולון נוטל מחצה מהרווחים. Now, the only difference, therefore, between Zevulun and Yisachar was that Zevulun said, I'll take care of all of the business needs on both of our properties, both on the Zevulun real estate and the Yisachar real estate. I'll hire the workers. I'll take care of all of the trade and the transportation of the goods. I'll make sure that the business runs properly. You sit and learn in the base medrash. That took a lot of effort on the part of Zevulun as far as hiring workers. There were a lot of costs in operating such an operation. And as such, Zevulun would deduct that as the cost of doing business before splitting profits with Yisachar. Shalachol apochos hu palga shel Yisachar, the hareu bal hasados v'habehemos shebechelko v'chelko shel Zevulun kares v'kablan haya mechzer. Shemkin lo haya Yisachar mechzer shalem b'matana mizevulun k'fi ha'inin shasu b'nei mimasher v'yech Zevulun v'rei natal Zevulun mitzat tirchasu b'shut v'skares v'kablan gam mechzer mechelko shel Yisachar. Okay, he's going through a little bit the very, very technical parts, and that Zevulun is also entitled to take a certain percentage as one of the workers also. Nimtza she'Yisachar natal rak kol masha yarevach bechelko aval chinam below shum hotzos. B'chol hotzos hotzi Zevulun mishalo shezeh haya inyan shutfuso im Yisachar. Bottom line is that Yisachar didn't lift a finger, but he took the half of the profits from both his portion, and from Zevulun's portion. He didn't have to expend any money in order to be able to get those profits, because Zevulun spent all of those himself. That was deducted from the profits, right? The hamechza shebechelko shel Zevulun shetzarach litein liyisachar iniach yisachar lizvulun ba'arachelek shetzarach litein lizvulun b'shalom. Avol mashma shezvulun haya marviach yoter mechelko be'eretz Yisrael shahaya shaveh lechelko shel Yisachar b'shvil hamischar b'hadvarim shahaya b'chelka. He says, but it also seems like Zevulun took more than 50% from his own portion, because it seems that from the Gemara that Zevulun's portion was richer in fields and vineyards than Yisachar's. The Sha'arei Zevulun Yisrael al Nachlasa Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ve'eshiv Lo Kula tzrichin lach al yedei chilazon. Okay, because if you look at the Gemara expresses that Zevulun was initially unhappy with the inheritance that he received in Eretz Yisrael because it was a coastal area. And God said to Zevulun, don't worry, the world is going to rely on you heavily for your chilazon snail that will be the source of dye for so many textile businesses, and you'll make a lot of money. Amar lefanav Ribbana shel olam mimo di'eni. In other words, so in other words, how am I going to find out? Says Zevulun to the Ribbana shel olam. In other words, mimo di'eni, who's going to inform me so that I will know that I'm the recipient of so much income as a result of my property. Amar lo sham yizbechu zivchei tzedek simen zeh yelecha kasher asur gezel ba'ola kach lo yigzelu mimcha klum. In other words, Hashem promised him that no one will steal from you. In other words, Zevulun was concerned that people will just trespass on my property. They will take the chilazon snail that is on the Mediterranean, on the Mediterranean coast, and they won't pay me for it. And Hashem promised him, no, people will understand that you are the owner of that property, and that if they get the chilazon snail off of your property, they're going to have to pay you. So Rav Moshe's argument is that the Gemara seems to imply that Zevulun was able to receive greater income at less effort. And it seems like Zevulun was actually on his property. There was actually even more bounty than on Yisachar's property from crystal. That he had the chilazon fish, and he had vineyards, and he had other assets, and therefore Zevulun actually ended up netting more. So it turns out that Zevulun's portion yielded more income clearly than Yisachar's portion, but they split everything 50-50 after the investment, and Yisachar would give off 50% of his reward in Olam Haba for that effort, for the effort that Zevulun was putting in. And Yisachar's Torah study, which earns a certain amount of schar in Olam Haba, would be split between the two of them. V'nira shegam haschar diikam lilimud haTorah gam ba'olam hazeh le'inin shalchlim peroseim ba'olam hazeh she'isa b'reish perak aleph depei le'inin sheTorah magno matzla disa b'sota hayagam kein schar zel lizvon. And it's not just that Zevulun would get the reward in the world to come, but as we say every morning in Birkas HaTorah, we say that there are certain things that you have the reward for in the next world, but you also have the dividends in this world as well. And Talmud Torah keneged kulam. And Torah study is the greatest of those things, that a person really gets not only future world reward, but there's gratification in this world as well. The Torah protects you from harm, and so forth. All of the benefits of Torah study in this world, Zevulun also received. It's a little bit hard to understand, because if Zevulun wasn't learning, what kind of benefit was he getting in this world? So Rav Moshe simply says that there's a certain protective element that Talmud Torah provides. Maybe that's the benefit.
Rabbi?
Maybe.
Does
Yes.
Does that also apply for people who support Torah study but don't necessarily study Torah themselves?
Well, we're talking about Zevulun. Zevulun is the person who supports Torah study and is not studying himself because he's too occupied in his business.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now, a mitzvah sheyesh lezvulun be'isek yisachar uzavulun. V'im yesh mitzvah tzedakah l'mi shekila kol nechasav machmas shelo avad leparnasasa. So now he says now let's go to the next section. There is what is the nature of the mitzvah that Zavulun is doing? Like, what mitzvah is Zavulun fulfilling by entering into this partnership? Can we say that he's performing a mitzvah? And in general, is there a mitzvah to give tzedakah to someone who ends up squandering their ability to be an earner by studying full time?
So it almost looks like people who are in school mindset and which is great merit, but it's letting them off the hook for their responsibility of learning Torah.
Right. It could be that Zavulun was able to make a calculus that he's much better, much more productive being outside the base medrash than being in the base medrash. It doesn't mean that Zavulun was completely exempt from Torah study. Maybe he learned a half an hour or an hour in the morning, did a daf yomi or did a halacha shir or whatever it was, and then he said, "But I can't do this all day. I'm not cut out for that. I have ADD, right? Which is what a lot of very successful business people have. They have attention deficit, and so they can't sit down for prolonged periods of time, but they have a lot of energy, and that's what makes them very productive." And yeah, you're right, Ron. It turns out that according to this, Zavulun basically took the approach, somebody's got to make the money and watch the business and take care of the real estate and holdings and things like that. You don't want to do that, Yisachar. I'm more cut out for that kind of work. So we'll have a partnership between the two of us. Yisachar has his own property, and that's what Rav Moshe just got through saying, is that he's basically telling us that Zavulun took care of Yisachar's property as also. Basically hired workers so that Yisachar, the men of Yisachar, would be able to sit and learn. That's how Rav Moshe is envisioning this kind of depiction in his mind of the nature of the partnership between Yisachar and Zavulun.
He's running Yisachar's business, so he can get a profit from there too.
He's running Yisachar's business, he's running his business, and his business is more profitable than Yisachar's business. That's the way that Rav Moshe is depicting it, that Yisachar just has crystal production from the sands on his shores, and perhaps some other properties that are also somewhat profitable, but nothing near what Zavulun is able to produce.
Because for this, I always thought that he get pay all his expenses, and when you study and I do my work, and in this case, he's running his own business. So.
Well, because you have to think about it. Yisachar has property in Eretz Yisrael. So somebody's got to run that. The wives seemingly, and it's interesting the way Rav Moshe depicts it. He says the women are not going to have time to run that business because their husbands are sitting and learning all day, which is very interesting because the truth is that women today in some communities give their husbands the ability to learn, and they go out and they're expected to raise the families and to run the household at the same time. It's a system that is not really optimal. Rav Moshe doesn't really see how it could possibly work. You're going to have to at some point hire somebody to run everything, right? So, okay. Now, V'nicha, he says, V'nicha lefizeh mashalo hiskiro hatur v'harama dinze behilchas tzedakah ela behilchas Talmud Torah. He says, based on the fact that I've just suggested that this is not a mitzvah of tzedakah, but rather it is a business partner. That's why the Shulchan Aruch does not mention the Yisachar Zvulun partnership in the laws of tzedakah, but mentions it instead in the laws of Torah study. Mishum shedin zehu av shaleka mitzvah tzedakah klal Kahadi Yisachar Shalahayu Aniyim, Shemishtat Mitzvah Tzedakah Leka. In other words, the people of Yisachar were not paupers. They were not poor people. This was not a charity case. This was Yisachar making a conscious decision that he would rather study Torah and let somebody else run his business and live off of the Yisachar Zvulun relationship. Okay, Elohu din acher she'ita rak b'Torah, shehu afilu b'misha eino ani. But rather, it is a halacha that applies to Torah study, and it applies to someone even if they're not poor. Daharei inyan zehu gam b'misha yesh lo nechasim v'yachol lasok b'avyarviach kamoshar inshi. It applies to a person, let's say, who owns a piece of real estate that yields a certain amount of income, but he doesn't want to work it. He'd rather study all day. So he hires someone to tend to that property. And that's what Zavulun was brought in for. He said, I'll take care of your property. I'll take care of my property, take care of my business. And that was the way that it was run. Umitzad mitzvah tzedakah mistaber shaleka b'ish kazeh afilu im ira shemachmas cheshko b'limat haTorah eno rotzeh lihitasek b'nachasav elililmod Torah ulitparnes mitzdaka ein mechuyavin litein lo. So let's say to extrapolate from here, let's say you have a person who has the ability. His father left him a business. Okay, his father leaves him a business and he says, here, son, here's a business for you to run. He says, no, thanks, Dad. I'm going to learn in Kollel, and I'll live off of the Kollel stipend. Is a person permitted to do that? Is a person permitted to say, I have an opportunity to make a living, but I'm going to forego that, and I'll live off of the Kollel stipend that is garnered from community donations. So if the donations are being given for tzedakah, then this person would not really have a right to collect from tzedakah funds. It would have to be that donations given to that particular kollel were guys who are completely able-bodied and capable of making a living themselves. It would have to be made clear, or perhaps it's implicit, that this is not in the realm of tzedakah, but rather because you want to be part of the Yisachar Zavulun partnership. In other words, this whole discussion really is addressing, like, what is the nature of supporting people who want to study Torah full time? Is it that you're giving tzedakah to these guys, or that you are entering into a partnership relationship where you are gaining? There's a quid pro quo. They are foregoing their ability to earn so that they can study Torah for you, and you're investing in that. Okay.
There's one wealthy guy who's sort of bringing in all these families but their responsibility really for them to do learning, but really to reach out to the community. So that's where their responsibility is to the community, not just for them to learn.
Right. So when you have an outreach kollel, which is what they're doing in Forest Hill, that's of a different category. That's where there are services being provided to the community, and that's where it's also part of that. It also may be arguably not tzedakah. You're paying people for being service providers. Like, I'm investing in this kollel because I want the services that this kollel provides. They provide shiurim. I can get a chavrusa from them, and so forth and so on. Ela yesh lo reshus limkor techila ma sheyesh lo ulihitparnes mizeh. He says, but rather, perhaps a person who is in this position, who wants to be able to learn full time, has really, what he should be doing is he should be selling off whatever he has of the business, make a living off of that. Ve'achar sheyichlu mos hahem yiyeh rashai az likach tzedakah. And only after he sells off all of his assets would he be allowed to collect tzedakah. Daharei azhu mamash ani, because then he has the din of an ani. Va'av keshuhu atzmo garam lazeh shelo bishvil limud Torah. And even though he caused himself to enter into a state of poverty, v'hu posheya, chayavim lefarnaso mitzdaka. Even if a person willfully allowed himself to become impoverished, there was Rav Moshe speaking theoretically, even a person who didn't make this conscious decision that he wanted to learn Torah full time. There is a mitzvah of tzedakah to any person who qualifies as an ani because he has no money, even if this person entered into poverty through negligence, through just being completely irresponsible. I still have a mitzvah of giving them tzedakah. And it happens all the time. You see somebody acting irresponsibly, throwing away money on gambling and things like that. And then they come and they need tzedakah. So is there a mitzvah to give them tzedakah? The answer is, says Rav Moshe, yes, there is a mitzvah to give someone who through his own poor choices became an ani. There still is a mitzvah to give him tzedakah. So in a situation where a person like a Yisachar, if he has assets and he has the ability to earn for himself by hiring workers and so forth and so on to run the business, then there's no right for him to take money from tzedakah. But if he wants to sell off all of his holdings and be completely without assets, and then after living off those assets, the money dries up and he becomes an ani, then he is allowed to take tzedakah. Uveperish amru b'bava metzia daf tes amid beis di'iboy mifker lenichse v'havi ani v'chazilei. That the Gemara gives an example of a person who could theoretically be an ani, and as a result of him theoretically being an ani, certain halachos would apply to him. And a person could basically declare all of his property to be hefker, to be ownerless. He would then qualify as an ani. The context of that Gemara is that Rabbi Eliezer once took his garment and threw it over a bunch of wheat stalks in a field that had been left for payah. And he knew that there was this old lady, let's say, who was too slow to take the gleanings from the field, from the payah, from the corner of the field that was left for the poor. And he wanted to make sure that she would have enough wheat to be able to take home. So he took his garment, he threw it on a group of stalks to allow time for this woman to come, but basically saying, hey, this is taken. No one touched this. Okay? So the Gemara questions, what right did he have to do that if he himself is not an ani? How can you preclude other aniyim from taking something? It's not yours. And the Gemara answers that theoretically Rabbi Eliezer was an ani, because if he wanted to, he could have declared all of his assets to be hefker, to be ownerless, and any person could be a theoretical ani. Every person is a theoretical ani, because every person could just, at a whim, declare his house to no longer be his, declare all of his bank accounts to no longer be his, and he would qualify as an ani. And because of that, every person can become an ani. You see, that's a result of negligence, and yet Rav Moshe says that person would be allowed to take tzedakah, even if they did something completely irresponsible. But all right, so there may be a disagreement among the sages, but it's for a technical reason, not because Rabbi Eliezer would not qualify as an ani. The kol shekain b'mishi hit'atzel la'avod et sadotav afshu b'shvil atzlut u'machram v'achalat imeim v'nasa ani shuhu notel leket shecho peya. He says the same thing would apply to a person who has holdings, who has wealth, and through laziness or just irresponsibility, he allows that business to be run to the ground, lives off of its temporary assets, and becomes a poor person. He's allowed to take tzedakah. You have to give him from the community chest that becomes an asks. And therefore, a person who says, I would rather study Torah all day and live off of tzedakah than to run the business that was left to me, he does have a halachic right to do that. But and that's not the case of Yisachar and Zevulun. Yisachar's business was being run industriously by Zevulun, and they had a true partnership, and it was not an act of charity. We'll hold it here for today, and I'll see if there's more that we can continue with this. Okay, we really don't have clarity yet on a few things, but we will get there. Have a great day.